Hello, my friends. This is Christian from Cardigans and Cards. Today we're going to be making a Gothic themed card. We will be utilizing the Gothic Tapestry stamp set by Stampers Anonymous that has the skull with some fun florals on it just to give it that little funky vibe I'm looking for. I will be pulling out some of my Altenew inks and doing some fun ink smushing. I'll be utilizing the Morning Frost, Moonrock, and Evening Gray shades for my ink smushing. Because this card is a 5x7, I cut down a 5x7 piece of watercolor cardstock. I chose watercolor cardstock because I really wanted to have the ink move on the piece of paper. I'm going to be getting this piece of paper really wet. If you're new to ink smooshing, it is one of the easiest techniques to do in the entire world. Yes, put some ink on your surface, you spray it with water, and you smoosh your piece of paper into it. Ta-da! You have now mastered ink smooshing. As with any type of dye ink, the layering is where you increase your depth and you can get the different color tones that you're looking for. So I started with my lightest ink. I made sure that I got that on my page just to have that base background because as I'm doing my ink smooshing, it's going to pick up in different areas each time I smoosh it down. In between each of my ink applications, I do heat set the paper. You can let that just sit and dry on its own. I'm impatient. I didn't want to do that. This card in total from the beginning of the recording till the end of the recording of the card was 33 minutes and 35 seconds. And that's with a lot of me putzing because I'm a putsy crafter. What can I say? With my workstation cleaned up, my paper dry, I was actually able to start adding the two different tones of gray that I needed to still capture. After I had my first base color down, just to get a little tone on the paper and to get over my perfectionism of not having something perfect, I did start adding more colors at once. So you'll see where I have my darker tone gray and then I have some mid-tone gray on there as well. I don't know why I have my name on here again. I apologize. I must have hit something. Who knows? It's a mystery to me too. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep picking up this ink, smushing it on my paper, and really trying to get a distressed look on my watercolor. I will be fast forwarding a portion of this until we get to the next type of ink smushing that we will participate in. With my work surface clean, I did pull out a piece of packaging from some stamps that I had received in the mail. And I'm going to do a little more of a controlled ink smushing. This is a different type of technique where you're just putting some ink on the acetate, you wet it down with lots of water, and you can pick up the acetate and use that as a really flimsy stamp, I guess is the best way to describe it, and you just smush it onto the paper, adding splotches, increasing that darkness, increasing that depth for the grungy look that I was going for. This process was repeated over and over again, allowing time for it to dry until I got the color that I was looking for and intensity that I was looking for. At one point, you'll even see me squirting my paper because I wanted to have a little bit more movement. I was getting too blotchy and I wanted to make sure that those colors spread and blended together and merged a little smoother. Here. Now that I've achieved the grungy look that I was going for, I did a little cleanup and really dried my piece of paper really well. Because I did that dose of water on there, I had little puddles, so I had to dry that up. If you're new to using watercolor paper, a way to tell if it's really dry is that it shouldn't feel cool to the touch. That signifies that there is still a lot of moisture in that paper, and I'm getting ready to start my stamping. I did not want to have my ink smear throughout there. So make sure when you are utilizing watercolor paper that if you're getting to the point where you are going to be inking or you are going to be doing heat embossing, make sure your paper is super, super dry. If you don't have a heat tool, just let it sit overnight. Make sure it has that time. Sometimes the paper takes a little bit longer to dry depending on the humidity of your area that you're living in. So just make sure that you know your paper is completely dry before you begin your next steps. Due to the nature of watercolor paper and it absorbing so much moisture, the paper does warp a little. You can do a couple different things for that. One, you could stick it in a book and just let the weight of gravity weigh on it to flatten it down. You can sandwich it in a piece of copy paper and run it through your die machine. You really want to make sure that you do have it buffered on both sides of your piece of paper so that you don't have any of the die cut marks from your machine being transferred to that image or to your panel, especially if you're going to be doing something else with it. I just did some bending and then put some magnets on it and let it sit for a few minutes. A stamp positioner is key to this technique on this card specifically because I did use watercolor paper. Watercolor paper has texture to it, so you need to have the ability to restamp your image to make sure that you are getting the color saturation and the completeness of the image transfer to the piece of paper. For this card, I utilized a pigment-based ink so that I would be able to, one, watercolor my flowers and leaves, but then also have that vibrancy and the fine detail that you get when you utilize a pigment ink versus a dye ink. Dye inks bleed when you add water to them. I didn't want that. And this stamp has a lot of detail to it, and I wanted to make sure I maintained those crisp lines. I will repeat this stamping over and over and over again. I don't even know how many times I did this. I had to ensure that I had the coverage and the depth of the color that I wanted. Again, this is something that you have to take in consideration when you are using a watercolor paper that has texture in the transfer of your image. When I reached the desired intensity, I did a little cleanup. I'll cut that out so you don't have to see that. Because I did utilize a pigment ink, you do need to allow that to dry. I did heat set this and I took a little lunch in between because I was hungry. It was now time to start doing some watercoloring. I wanted to have just a cast of color on my images. And because I'm using such a small area that I want to have color and I want the control associated with it, I utilize a number 2 round brush. I did pull out my Altenew 24 pan of watercolors and started to get my colors prepped and ready. For the watercolors, I utilized 3 main colors. I utilized Cherry Blossom as my pink, and I watered this color down a lot. It's a pretty intense color, and I, again, just wanted a wash of color. Then you'll see as we progress that I did add a little bit of rock collection to it, which is kind of like a black tone. I wanted to cut back on the brightness of the color and add some depth at those inner crevices of the floral itself. Then finally, for the leaves, I watered down the Green Meadows paint super thin again and just did a light wash over the leaves of the image. I will put on a little music and speed this up just a little bit so that you can sit and watch the watercoloring. And I'll touch base with you when we're all done and the panel is dry. With my watercolor completed, it was now time to start putting my card together. I pulled out some dies and trimmed down my panel to fit with inside the parameters of the stamp itself. So I wanted to make sure that I had that grungy look, but I wanted to make sure that I captured the edges so that it looked more polished and more finished. So I putzed around until I found the exact size that I wanted. As we talked about a little earlier, when we talked about the watercolor paper itself and how it will warp because of the amount of water that has been placed on it, I will be taping down my die to this piece of paper in multiple spots. So there will be something on all four sides. This is going to, one, help and ensure that my die does not shift because the water paper is a much thicker piece of paper. Secondly, this will help even out that warping that we had talked about a little bit earlier. I will sandwich this image in between a piece of copy paper so that I don't have any ink transfer or watercolor transfer because I did not wait for this to dry to my plates. So then the next time when I go to use my plates and I cut something out, I don't have new colors on it because it's always a surprise and I don't clean them probably like you're supposed to or ever. Nope, I should probably do that. To assemble the card, I glued my black piece of paper to my card base. I was pleasantly surprised that I measured appropriately. That's always exciting. No T-square ruler coming out today, no craft knife, and the potential of cutting my finger off. Didn't happen today. Hallelujah. So then I applied some foam tape to the back of my image panel. This will help stiffen that card base even more so that that watercolor paper can be smoother. Yes, you do have to put quite a bit on the back of the watercolor cardstock if you want to make sure that that panel is as flat as it can possibly be. The image was centered in the best of my ability. I still can't get things straight, but I try really hard, so that counts. When I was looking at my panel, I decided that I really didn't want to put a sentiment on front. This card was going to my sister, and I knew she would love it and want to frame it and put it into her little cabinet that she had just bought, where she puts all of her eggs that she brings in from outside with her chickens. So I pulled out my Sweet Sentiments stamp set from Gina K Designs and used the Wishing You a Very Happy Birthday. I did put this in a stamping platform in order for me to get it inked up appropriately because I should have done this before I added all the stuff on the front, but it happens. You live, you learn. It's an afterthought. So the stamping platform will allow me to be able to ensure that my card doesn't move when I get that image on there and that I can get a full contact with it. I did utilize that same pigment ink so my blacks matched from the front to the inside of the card. To finish my card, I just wanted a little more reflection on the front of the card, but still maintain that grungy look that I was looking for. And I pulled out of my stash from probably 1999, maybe 2001, not quite sure, some little pearls that I found on a sticker sheet. I wasn't too confident in if they were going to stick anymore because that's pretty old for adhesive, but eh, if they fall off, she can glue them back on. I figured she's going to have it in a frame anyway, so they should be smooshed in there good enough, but we'll find out. I can always glue them on if they start to fall off later. And just like that, the card was finished. There was a lot of heat setting and a lot of drying stuff, and I still had a card completed in less than an hour. It was 33 minutes, like I said earlier. This was a great way to put a lot of bang into a card by just utilizing a stamp and adding some color to it without actually having to do a lot of work. If you feel inclined, please subscribe to my channel. You never know what adventures we're going to go on next. From very simple cards for beginners to more complex cards, it's always an adventure. Until next time.